All right, once upon a time, there was a little girl who had her parents take her to a cultural shrine, the Shrine of the Golden Arches. And there she saw an opportunity to buy a combination of food and a little toy that someone in a fit of marketing genius called the Happy Meal. The Happy Meal. "May I have it?" she asked. "I must have it. I can't live without it." But Dad says, no. That toy is just a trivial little thing that forces the cost of the meal to be inflated to a point where it's not really a good value anymore. It's not in the budget. We're not going to do it. "But you don't understand," she said, because she knew that they were not just going to be buying fries and McNuggets and a Pixar toy. They would be buying happiness. Happiness. And so she was convinced that she had a little McVacuum at the core of her soul. You know, like Augustine said so many years ago, our hearts are restless until they find their rest in a Happy Meal. So she explained to her parents, "I want this Happy Meal more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. And if you get me this Happy Meal, I'll never ask for anything else for the rest of my life. This is it right here. If I get it, no more complaining, no more complaining. If you get me that Happy Meal, I will be content for the rest of my life." Well, her parents thought that sounded like a pretty good trade-off, so they bought it. And it worked. It worked. She grew up to be a contented, grateful woman. She lived with serenity and grace. And although her life in many ways was difficult, the man that she married turned out to be bad, and he abandoned her with 3 small children and no money. The kids were kind of difficult as they grew up, and when she was older, she lived hand to mouth with really very, very little. But she never complained. Why? She got the Happy Meal. She got the Happy Meal. And she'd think of it often. She'd think, man, I remember that Happy Meal. What joy I found in those days. And as she predicted, it brought her lasting satisfaction. She was grateful for the rest of her life. Right. Right. Does life ever work out like that? Now, you would think that after a while, kids would catch on to this thing and realize, those Happy Meals never really give you lasting satisfaction and happiness. I'm not going to fall for that. I'm not going to get suckered into that again. But that doesn't happen. Because when the excitement wears off, they need another fix. They need another Happy Meal. That's why they keep changing the toys. And that's why we keep buying them and they keep not working. Matter of fact, the only one that Happy Meals bring happiness to is McDonald's. You ever wonder why Ronald McDonald wore that stupid grin all the time? 1 billion Happy Meals served. That's why. Now, of course, here's the point. Only a child would be so naive, right? Only a child would be so foolish to think that a change in circumstances would bring about lasting contentment or happiness. Or maybe not. Maybe when we get older, we don't necessarily get any smarter. Our Happy Meals just get more expensive. Because all day long, we are bombarded with messages that seek to tell us 2 things. One is that we are or should be discontent, and that contentment is just one step away. Try this, buy this, use this, wear this, drive this, eat this, put this in your hair. I mean, the things that you can buy for hair contentment alone are staggering. I mean, think about it. You can wash it, condition it, gel it, dye it. You can wax it if it's growing where it shouldn't. You can Rogaine it if it's not growing where it should. If you think about it, we live longer, we eat better, we work less and play more than ever in history. But are we happier? Or are we just cleaner and better groomed discontents? There was a sociologist that was doing an activity with some minister friends of his. They asked him to join all of the rest of that little gang to go to a Rolling Stones concert at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. Now, I've been to the Rose Bowl, just gigantic, iconic stadium. It's really cool. I actually played a professional golf tournament at a course that wraps all the way around the Rose Bowl. You kind of play in the shadow of the Rose Bowl. It's really pretty cool. So this group of men, they want to do this theological study on pop culture. So there they were, a group of middle-aged pastors at a Rolling Stones concert in the Rose Bowl, holding up their iPhones so their kids, and they're calling them on the FaceTiming on the phone so the kids would realize that their fathers were indeed actually at the Rolling Stones concert. And at one point, one of the pastors said, there are 85,000 people here right now. more than will be in all the churches in Pasadena this weekend combined. If you had one opportunity, what would you say to them? What would you say to them? And right at that moment, Mick Jagger kicks into one of their signature songs, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. It was perfect timing, just perfect. So I'm going to ask 5 questions today related to this issue of gratitude and contentment and satisfaction. So here's the very first one. Why are we so discontent? Why are we so discontent? I mean, there's no question that we live in a discontented society. And this was brilliantly commented on 3,000 years ago by the wisest man who ever lived. Solomon in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, he's evaluating the search for meaning and purpose through earthly pursuits. And after all that, he says these words in Ecclesiastes 1. Meaningless, meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does a man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? All things are wearisome. That's a great word, wearisome, because it's not just weary. It's not just in the sense of being physically tired. Wearisome carries with it the sense of exasperation, this sigh of, oh, no more, please. Because Solomon went down the list, didn't he? The pursuit of ultimate pleasure, the attainment of ultimate success, the acquisition of wealth. None of these, he says, is enough to bring lasting satisfaction. The happy just wears off. If you think about it, all earthly pursuits end up being trivial pursuits. A life of frustration, a whole life devoted to trivial pursuit, is fatal to the human spirit. It causes us to miss out on the blessing of joy and gratitude for the simple things in life. Now, what's interesting to me about God's role in this whole thing is that sometimes he allows us to become frustrated or discontent for a purpose. And Paul talks about this in Romans 8. He says, creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but because God wanted it, and because all along, listen, there was this hope. There was this hope that everything God made would be set free from ruin to have the freedom and glory that belonged to God's children. God just knew that after the fall, we would try to set up our own gods, other gods, trying to give our lives to the pursuit of pleasure or wealth or power or status or whatever it is that we chase. So one of the results of these quests would be that none of those things would be able to give us soul satisfaction. Our pursuit of them would always involve some measure of disappointment. But he did this, Paul says, in hope. He did it in hope. God's hope is that we will stop searching for infinite satisfaction from finite things. His hope is that frustration will once more cause the prodigal son to stop rooting around in the pig trough and come home to the Father. His hope is that the day will dawn that we will understand that we can't get no satisfaction no matter how hard we try, and we just come home. So this frustration then is kind of a gift. It's one of the forms that God's love takes for people who might otherwise throw their lives away on trivial pursuits. Seek above all else the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That's what Jesus said. And he says, and everything else gets thrown in as part of the deal. Put me first, seek me first, and you'll get all this along with it. Apart from that, everything else is just trivial. You know, one of Jesus' most effective teaching techniques was deliberately induced frustration. He was always giving his disciples questions they couldn't answer, assignments that they couldn't complete, and teaching that they couldn't understand. Now, frustration, it gets our attention, and it can open us up to realizing that we desperately need God. You know, discontent was a major theme in the life of Israel from the Exodus onward, because for 400 years, they had been slaves in Egypt. For 400 years, they dreamed only of liberty. They just wanted to be free. And they knew that they would be truly grateful if they could just be freed from these circumstances. And then it happened. God miraculously intervenes. Their bondage was over. Their enemy had been destroyed, and they were given identity and security. And not only that, but the promise of their own homeland. I mean, suddenly they had everything they wanted. So they would be grateful forever, right? Not so much. Exodus 15:23, not long after that release from slavery, it says, when they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter, and the people complained against Moses. They had just gotten exactly what they wanted, but as soon as things were less than perfect, the complaining starts. Which leads to the next question. What fuels our ingratitude? What is it that fuels our ingratitude? That's the easiest answer in the world. Complaining. It's complaining. That's what fuels ingratitude. You know, these words complain and murmur, they became two of the dominant words in the story of the Exodus. And the Greek translation of that word is goguzo, which is like our words grumble and murmur. They're what linguists call an onomatopoeia. Remember that from 8th grade English, onomatopoeia? It's basically a word that sounds like what it means, like meow or moo or jingle or something like that. Sounds like what it means. So just for a little test here, I'd like all of us to say these words, grumble, grumble, murmur, murmur. Just say it under your breath. Say, grumble, grumble, murmur, murmur. That's what it sounds like in a crowd that's complaining right there. So you just experienced the Exodus. Well, God in his mercy decides to intervene in the midst of all this, and he gives them good water to drink. So now surely they'll find nothing to complain about, right? Again, not so much. Just a few days later in Exodus 16, look what it says. Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, when we sat around and ate our fill of bread. Oh, the great days of slavery. Oh, yes. For you brought us out into this wilderness to kill us with hunger. If only we had died, they said. These people have raised complaining to a new art form. We're not asking for much. If you could have just given us a happy meal and a lethal injection, that really would have made us happy. God intervenes again. They complain about bread, and he, in his infinite patience, rains down bread from heaven upon them. It was called manna, a word which is not as much a name as it is a question. It means, what is it? That's really the literal translation. What is it? Manna was an amazing food product. It says it tasted like wafers made with honey. It was also really quite versatile. Israel was told to bake what they wanted to bake, boil what they wanted to boil, and set aside that which they wanted to eat raw. It kind of reminded me of Bubba in Forrest Gump talking about all the ways you could make shrimp. You remember that? Fried shrimp, boiled shrimp, Cajun shrimp, coconut shrimp, all kinds of shrimp, Bubba said. But these guys, now they have baked manna, boiled manna, manna burgers, manna bagels, manna cotti, and of course, banana bread, right? Yes. So now that they have manna, they're going to be satisfied, right? This actually moves them into an even deeper level of discontent. It got dangerous here. Numbers 11:4, here's what it says. The rabble among them had a strong craving, and the Israelites wept again and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, onions, and garlic. Again, the glory days of slavery. We always forget about that. But now our strength is dried up, and there's nothing at all but this manna to look at. Now they despise it. It was not a happy meal anymore, was it? Here's the next question. What is the danger of ingratitude? I mean, if gratitude is so important, and it is, then it's logical to see that ingratitude has dangers connected to it, and it does. One danger is that it is contagious. It's contagious. It spills over onto others, and it's really, really easy to pick up from others. In Numbers 11, Moses couldn't take it anymore, and so he just kind of melts down in front of God. And he speaks to God in words that any self-appointed martyr can identify with. Here he says in 11:11, why have you treated your servant so badly that you lay on me the burden of all these people? Did I give birth to them that you should ask me to act like a nurse and carry them in my arms all the way to the land you promised them to their ancestors? Where could I get enough meat for all these people? They keep whining and asking for meat. I can't be responsible for all these people by myself. It's too much for me. If you're going to treat me like this, have pity on me and kill me. God, he says, God, if you even like me at all, just kill me right here. Now listen, when followers give in to this complaining syndrome, it can really destroy a leader. When leaders fall into that kind of darkness, the whole group can lose joy and hope. Everybody wants to quit. So it's contagious. Now, the second danger of ingratitude is found in the verses that follow. In verse 18, Moses says, "Tomorrow you will have meat to eat. The Lord has heard you whining, saying you wished you had some meat and that you were better off in Egypt." So the second danger is this: God may just give us what we ask for. Verse 19 says, "You'll have to eat it not just for 1 or 2 days, but for a whole month, until it comes out of your ears, until you're sick of it," God says. You want meat so bad, you're going to eat it until you barf. Now, the Israelites discovered that getting what we want will never bring lasting contentment to our discontented hearts. And listen, beyond that, we will come to despise what was actually once our heart's desire because it didn't satisfy. And so it went for 40 years. No matter what God gave them, whether it was liberation from slavery or divine guidance or manna or miraculous water or a hope and a future, it was never enough. The people died grumbling. They died grumbling. Now here's the next question. What are the signs of ingratitude or discontentment? What are the signs? There are ways that you can kind of self-diagnose this. Here are some signs to look for. I'll move through these quickly. First, I find myself bored or dissatisfied in my work. Bored or dissatisfied in my work. In other words, I expect it to not only pay the bills, but also to provide me with some sense of identity or significance. And it becomes crushed beneath the weight of my own expectations. So that's the first thing. I'm bored or dissatisfied in my work. Here's the second thing. I'm disappointed in my relationships. In other words, my friends or my spouse or whoever, they don't meet all my emotional needs, and I'm quickly growing in resentment. Third thing is, I ponder unhappiness rather than experience a moment. I ponder unhappiness. In other words, I can't seem to enjoy the simplicity of a moment, but I analyze it to death, wondering why there's some trace of inner pain there. So I'm pondering unhappiness. Next one, I use distractions to try to escape. We're really, really good at this. It means I use entertainment or distractions or something as some kind of relief. So as a result, I'll increasingly need more TV or movies or entertainment or shopping or hobbies, travel, alcohol, whatever it may be. Distractions, we use distractions. Next, I lose generosity of spirit. Here's what I mean when I say that. My initial response to events or invitations or encounters with people becomes cynical, sometimes even hostile, because there's this festering sort of emotional pus on the inside of me. Last thing, I resent others' blessings. I resent others' blessings. It's like I'm bothered in some way by the perception that others' lives are more pleasant than mine, and their circumstances are easier, and I find myself thinking or sometimes saying, it's not fair. That's not fair. It's like a win for them means a loss for me. That's a terrible perspective. So those are all signs that you're struggling with discontentment or ingratitude. So now, if I can see some of myself in all of that, how do I get out of it? That's important to know. How do I get out of it? There's a really, really good insight given in the Old Testament by the prophet Isaiah in chapter 55. It says, "Come, everyone who is thirsty, here is water. Come, you that have no money, buy grain and eat. Come buy wine and milk. It will cost you nothing," God says. "Why spend your money on what does not satisfy? Why spend your wages and still be hungry? Listen to me and do as I say, and you will know the best food of all." What Isaiah so wants people to know is that God alone is true bread. He is true bread. Living in his love and in his care is the only hope for satisfaction. Now, Jesus, many years later, says this in John chapter 6. "I am the bread of life." Not "I know where to get it." He says, "I am the bread of life. The one who comes to me will never hunger." In other words, you'll be satisfied. In other words, that craving, that endless search through stuff in order to fill the hole inside, it comes to a fulfilling end once and for all. That which we search for is found in him, and it's found in him alone. And blessed is the one who discovers that sooner than later, because it is the way to avoid a frustrating, wasted life. All right, just a couple things to take with us this Thanksgiving season to keep in mind, because it's a couple ways to practice gratitude, because we are better people if we do. We're better people if we do. First thing is to learn with God's help to handle disappointment and delayed gratification. We got to learn to handle that. Handle it with grace rather than agitation. Delays and disappointment can sometimes be the very things that we need the most. Now, remember this truth I'm about to tell you. I don't know if you need to jot it down or just kind of imprint it on your memory, but here it is. The experience of frustration and disappointment is irreplaceable in the development of a grateful heart. I'll say it one more time. The experience of frustration and disappointment is irreplaceable in the development of a grateful heart. I know that doesn't sound very warm or happy or tweetable, but it's really, really important. If we get this, we win at this. One more tip. When it comes to gratitude, respond to opportunity, not obligation. Respond to opportunity, not obligation. So look for opportunities to voice gratitude. I mean, just the other day, I was talking with Bonnie, and she said, I don't want to let this go unsaid. We'd been talking about a woman that we know who had been just a great blessing as of late, and Bonnie said, I want to make sure I recognize that and voice that. So she sent her a text just to tell her how much of a blessing she's been lately. It took a minute. 1 minute is all that took. So look for those opportunities. It's not obligation at all. And I understand the need to teach our kids and those around us to express gratitude when it's appropriate. And the Thanksgiving season is a great time for those lessons, and we should be teaching those, experience those, and letting that elevate in our priorities. For example, my parents, I remember, would prompt me when I was young. What do you say to the nice man? You say thank you, right? What do you say to Aunt Edna for bringing her spam and beet casserole to Thanksgiving? What do you say? Well, how's a kid supposed to respond to that? I mean, with honesty? It's not really a question. I think my parents would have been shocked if I'd have said, Aunt Edna, what in the name of all that's holy were you thinking? Spam and beets? Aunt Edna, you should not be allowed to present meals anymore. You should be locked up. But that's not called for. The right response is, thank you, Aunt Edna. I think my parents would have been equally shocked if I'd have, spoken effusively. Oh, Aunt Edna, what I have just experienced here has given me awe and wonder in the highest degree. I am but a child. And without someone like you providing what you have done, I would die. And you have presented this meal, nay, this banquet, as an act of love and service to me. And Edna, you are a true humanitarian. In the name of children all over the place, I salute you. Didn't say that either. What do you say? Thank you. It's so simple. Thank you. You express gratitude. Now, I understand. Our hope as we instruct on the importance of gratitude is that it would move from obligatory politeness into actually becoming grateful people. Because the ability to express gratitude, to experience it, to express it, offer heartfelt thanks, it is one of the most fundamental signs of life and spiritual wholeness. It is. True gratitude, it means coming to understand that everything is a gift. And life, namely life with God, is the greatest gift of all. And we should express gratitude regularly and heartfeltly.